right, welcome everyone back to the TD SportsPress podcast. We're back here on this Friday night. This is going to be a pretty detailed episode. We're going to get into all of the quarterfinal episodes. We're going to get into all the quarterfinals, what happened in the quarterfinals, the upsets. 3 of the 4 lower seats won those games. We'll get into that. We'll get into the transfer portal, what that looks like, and is the era of the SEC being the best conference over? There's a lot of different things we're going to get over today. So make sure, if you guys are new here, make sure you guys subscribe, all those good things to our channel, because we are still growing and we've had a great 2025 and moving into 2026. So we are hoping for another big year of growth. So without further ado, we're going to get going with our first right here. Miami beat Ohio State, and that is wrong. Miami beat Ohio State. Whoops, that is not good. Whoops. There we go. We're going to act like that didn't happen. Miami beats Ohio State 24-14. I messed up on the score because Miami scored with like 45 seconds to go. But this game was very telling for Ohio State. Ohio State was coming into this game getting beat by Indiana. And the same things that happened against Indiana happened against Miami. They couldn't protect Julian Saint. Julian Saint was sacked over 5 times. And he just was never comfortable the entire game, and that's credit to Miami's defense. Miami's defense was way better than I knew. Like, Miami's defense was good. I didn't realize at the rate that it was. And some of you guys can say, well, Ohio State's offensive line was just that bad. You got to give credit to Miami for being able to do those things. Carson Beck made great decisions when it mattered for Miami. He had a huge scramble on 3rd and 11 where it could have turned the whole tide of the game, and he put his head down and got the extra. Instead of 10 yards, he got 12 yards. Put his head down and got 2 more. What a play by Carson Beck that really changed the game. Another huge play that happened in that game was the pick 6. A lot of different things happened on that. The first thing I'd like to say is those screen passes, they're boom or bust. Like, they're either going to go for 10 yards or they're going to be a pick 6 going the other way. The reason why it was a pick 6 for Miami going the other way, which was honestly the difference in this game, was Jeremiah Smith didn't touch anybody. He didn't block anyone. I'm not sure what he was doing. I'm not sure if he didn't know who his blocking assignment was, but that's what we call a lookout block. A lookout block means look out, he's coming. And they were going the other way with that pick 6, and yeah, it was 14-0 Miami. Ohio State went on a drive late in the second quarter to get a field goal, and they missed. And, they're down 14-0. The offense showed up in the second half, but, it was that pick 6 really changed everything. Ohio State had a good drive going, and they threw one of those screen passes to the outside, and it just did not work for Ohio State. There's a lot of different things that Ohio State didn't do. But you got to give credit to Miami. Miami came in. They were 9.5-point underdogs. I think it was 7 when the time kickoff happened, and they didn't care. They played with no fear. I think a lot of teams that play Ohio State, they have this fear that, oh man, this might get ugly quick. And Miami just, they gave Ohio State a bloody nose, which is called what it is. They came into the game, they scored 7-0, got the pick 6 up 14-0, and they just, they kind of looked back, but Ohio State just couldn't get anything going. And so Miami, they will move on. We'll talk about who they're going to face coming up, but look out for Ohio State after losing this game. There's a lot of different ways Ohio State could go from here. I don't think the biggest thing that I would say is they missed Brian Hartline calling plays. So that's probably the most. When I didn't realize that at the time, I missed that information. But Ryan Day was calling plays. Last time Ryan Day called plays, if I remember right, was 2 years ago. And Brian Hartline was one that was calling all the plays during this year when they had their offense going. The reason why Brian Hartline was not calling plays this time around was because Brian Day thought he'd be more focused on the USF job. So in the end, Ohio State has a lot of questions. They just felt like they were untouchable until Indiana and Miami got them, and that could be 2 things. Maybe their competition was the best. I don't know, and maybe they just had 2 bad games. There's just a lot of questions on. I think Ohio State needs to go get a huge running back in the transfer portal. I think that's another thing that Ohio State needs to do. They have Bo Jackson. He's a great running back, but they could not get the run. Like, Bo Jackson's a great running back. Nothing against him, but they need to go get another running back. That was the difference between this Ohio State this year compared to where last year. They had Trevor or Henderson. That was a huge one. And Judkins. Henderson and Judkins were huge for Ohio State down the stretch, having those two backs. And they just only had one back. They weren't able to run the ball. Julian Sain just never looked comfortable. And, that's what happens to Ohio State when you get to this time of the year. And, yeah, not a lot of people picked Miami. I didn't pick Miami, but if you pick Miami, that's awesome. I always thought that Miami could match up to Ohio State, but I thought they were going to get out-coached, and I thought Julian Sain would outperform Carson Beck, and I was wrong. That didn't happen. And so you got to give credit to Miami for, winning the game. They're moving on to the semifinal. Mario Cristobal, I've been a very big critic of Mario Cristobal. I said that he's, not a top-tier head coach, and this playoff run is starting to make me think otherwise. And, yeah, I was wrong about that. And I will admit to that being wrong to that. I was wrong about Mario Cristobal. I was wrong about Carson Beck. And they are right in the mix to win a national championship, which is great for Miami. So, shout out to Miami for beating Ohio State. Ohio State's got a lot of questions they need to answer going into next year. The next game that we are going to be talking about was probably the game that I got dead wrong, and I will admit that I got it dead wrong. Oregon blows out Texas Tech 23-0. This was not in my cards. I thought Texas Tech would struggle with Oregon on offense. I didn't realize the amount of strugglingness, if that's even a word, that they had against Oregon's defense. Texas Tech's defense, it was 16-0 and Oregon scored with 45 seconds to go. It was Texas Tech held them to 16 points. That's what I'm going to say. And Texas Tech and Morrison, man, he played his worst game of the year. And a lot of people can say, look at who they played. And I think that's right. I don't think Texas Tech had the best competition. And they are a product of the Big 12. So I was kind of in the thing that I didn't think Texas Tech was a paper tiger, but Texas Tech was a paper tiger on offense. Dante Moore had a great game for Oregon. He had everything going for him. I didn't really understand some of Oregon's play calling when they were just trying to run the football and they couldn't. Oregon went down the first drive and they scored 3 points, but they threw 80 yards, 75 yards, I would say, out of the shotgun quick passes, getting Dante Moore in a rhythm. And then, as the first half progressed, Texas Tech kept getting stops against Oregon's offense, but Texas Tech's offense couldn't do anything. Texas Tech had that one explosive play in the first half where the hole was plugged and he made a great job to bounce it outside and got 80 yards, but that was probably the best that Texas Tech had in the first half. Going into the second half, Dante Moore kept putting on a show. He's a great quarterback. Oregon's defense just kept stifling Texas Tech. They couldn't do anything. Texas Tech kept trying to run the ball on first down. They weren't able to run the ball the first down. And then they would throw it, and then, Morrison would get sacked, and it'd be second and, third and 12, third and 13. And it's really hard for a team to win when you're always constantly in those situations. So definitely have to give props to Oregon. And, you look at it from a motivational side. I didn't look at it from this way, but Oregon was in this position last year. They were in the same position Texas Tech was. They got beat by Ohio State coming after that bye. And that didn't phase, Oregon this year. They played James Madison. They were able to work out some kinks. They didn't look the best against James Madison. And they learned. They were on a mission. Texas Tech, it was a great year. They're, 12-0. They win the Big 12. It's the best year in, football, probably in program history for Texas Tech in this decade. Maybe back to 2007 when they had Michael Crabtree. Maybe that year was better, but it just felt like Oregon wanted it more, and they want to take that next step and go win a national championship. And Oregon really showed that if Dante Moore's firing on all cylinders, they're gonna make some noise in this playoff. They're gonna keep going. So you have to give credit to Oregon for being able to do the job that they were able to do. And, Texas Tech, where do they go from here? Texas Tech, you look at their schedule next year. They don't really play anyone. They're probably harder this. I looked at their schedule. I think their hardest game will probably be Arizona. I think Arizona will be better than Arizona State. Just a quick view, but I think we're going to have the same conversation about Texas Tech next year. I really do believe that. Where is the Big 12? And I'm a huge fan of the Big 12. They won a lot of bowl games, but to be to be on par with the Big 10, SEC, you're going to have to win some of these playoff games. And they haven't won a playoff game. The last time the Big 12 won a playoff game was TCU in 2022. I think that was, or 2021 and then into 2022 when they got blown out by Georgia. That's the last time the Big 12 won anything in the college football playoffs. So there are a lot of Big 12 fans. And I'm a big fan of the conference. It's really fun to watch. But in order for the Big 12 to get any respect, and get 2 teams in, they need to be competitive. And they were competitive. And Arizona State almost beat Texas. But, yeah, I think, like I said in the beginning, I think Texas Tech was a product of their schedule. I think they need to schedule a little bit more harder in the non-conference because Oregon, I mean, they got beat by Indiana, and they looked at Texas Tech, and they're like, well, they're not better than Indiana. And Texas Tech, they're looking over there like, man, can we beat these guys? Like, we haven't played anyone of their caliber. I think the hardest, team that Texas Tech played up to this point was BYU, who, they rolled BYU both times. You can look at it both those ways. So, absolutely huge games for Oregon. Good luck to Oregon moving on to the semifinals. Now, we got 2 more games to get to. So, those are our first 2 takeaways. So, moving on to our next one here. Indiana blows out Alabama 38-3. This game I was dead right about. I picked Indiana to win by 2+ touchdowns, and they won 38-3. I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting them to win by 2+ touchdowns, and you got to give an A+ effort to the offensive line of Indiana. They absolutely controlled the line of scrimmage. Alabama was not able to do anything on defense. And it was actually kind of funny going on to Twitter after the game where some people were, because Ty Simpson got injured during the game in the third or right before the end of the second quarter, and he fumbled. And a lot of people were saying the game would be different if Ty Simpson didn't get hurt during that time, and that's not right. That's farthest from the truth. I didn't know Ty Simpson played defense because Indiana won 38-3. I think at halftime it was 17-0. It was 10-0 when Ty Simpson got hurt, but it wouldn't have been a game. Alabama should have never been in the playoff. I'll be honest with you guys. A lot of people are saying Miami shouldn't be in, or the real team people should have had problems with is Alabama. They were a 3-loss team. They were exactly who they were. I mean, you look how they got beat against Indiana. Couldn't control the line of scrimmage. Look at when they got beat by Florida State. Florida State out-physical them. They got beat by Georgia in the SEC championship, and they got punked in that game. And all of Alabama's losses, they didn't have more than 35 yards rushing. And even against Oklahoma, they didn't have. The second time, they only had 35 yards of rushing. So there's a lot of questions at Alabama right now because they got straight out punked. Like Indiana looked like a team that we saw from Nick Saban back when he was coaching Alabama. Like Indiana reminds me a lot. Kirk Cignetti did coach with Nick Saban, and that might be part of it. But you got to give props to Indiana. Fernando was amazing. He's a really good quarterback, but he makes even better decisions. He knows when, hey, man, let's just check down here. Let's get to, 3rd and 3 instead of, heaving it down on 2nd and 8 and, throwing it in harm's way. He is really good with that. And then the Indiana offensive line, I've already talked about them, but my gosh, they controlled the line of scrimmage. They did whatever they wanted. And, Indiana exposed Alabama. You can call it whatever you want. They exposed them. Alabama, they were soft. They were soft and they got punked. And Indiana, with Kirk Cignetti, is looking like a well right now. I'm not sure in terms of, everyone, like most of the games were close. I mean, and then you watch this guy, with the exception of Oregon, but, Indiana just looks like a different team than everyone else in the college football playoff field right now going into the semifinals. And maybe I'm wrong. We'll see what Oregon can do because I think Indiana and Oregon might be in the national. Like that's the actual national championship. We'll talk about more about that game, next week. But I'm just starting to get the feels like this is going to be a bloodbath between those 2 teams. Indiana already beat Oregon, but I think it's going to be a little bit different this time around. So, like I said, you have to give props to Indiana going to the Rose Bowl. I think this is the first time Indiana won a bowl game since 1991. Not only was it a bowl game, they won a college football playoff game. So props to Kirk Cignetti, and I think that he said it himself. You couldn't write a better movie than what you're watching with Indiana. Going from being a basketball school and their basketball team is still somewhat decent, but now Kirk Cignetti's turned this football program into a powerhouse, and there's going to be some news about a transfer quarterback that might be going to Indiana, which I will talk about more when I get to the transfer portal because the transfer portal is open. But if they get this quarterback, Indiana's going to be right back in the driver's seat. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to save it for the last part of the episode. So, but you got to give props to Indiana for exposing the SEC and Alabama. So, moving on. Our last game that we have for you guys was Ole Miss versus Georgia. This was obviously the best game of the college football slate that we had for the playoffs. And Ole Miss beat Georgia 39-34. And what happened in this game? I'll give you guys a quick little recap. It felt like in the first half, Georgia was going to pull away. They kind of did. They were up 21-12. But that Ole Miss kicker made a 55-yard, 56-yarder to get those 6 points, which was huge in the end. And when a lot of times, when college football, playoff teams are having trouble with their kickers, Ole Miss was having a weapon. They weren't quite scoring, but the kicker was keeping them in the game, which was absolutely huge. So we go into halftime, 21-12. Maybe Ole Miss got something before half. I don't think so. And then Trinidad, shambles. Or Trinidad shows up in the second half, and he might be the best quarterback going to the NFL. Is he going to the NFL? I don't know. But Trinidad, what I watch, I have not seen a quarterback do this year. It was the best performance in a half that I have seen from a quarterback, and that is no fault to Fernando, great quarterback. But watching the throws that Trinidad would make, and the scrambling against that Georgia's defense, and people are going to say, well, Georgia's defense is not the same. I agree with you, but look what Georgia's defense did against Alabama. And maybe it was that Alabama wasn't that good. That could also be the case. But, man, Trinidad, at 3rd and 7, he scrambles 30 yards backwards, and then he throws a little lob pass for 8 yards, and they get the first down. Huge play. Another play in that drive, if I remember right, Trinidad throws it for about 30 yards on the run. Could have easily got the first down. He goes ahead and throws that pass, and, Trinidad, you got to give props to Ole Miss. I didn't see this coming from Ole Miss. I thought that Georgia would win this game very easily. But, man, I really doubted Trinidad, and I shouldn't have, because Trinidad's the best quarterback in college football right now. I don't think that's a hot take. I think a lot of people would agree with me after that performance. No offense to Fernando. I think he's great, but Fernando hasn't had a performance like that against a team of that caliber of Georgia. That's what I would say. And people could say stuff about the SEC, which is true. But Georgia's defense played better down the stretch, so I did not see that happen. And so you got to give props to Ole Miss. They're going to go move on and play Miami, which is going to be a fun game to watch. A really good offense versus a really good defense. Who's going to win that game? And two different styles of offense and defense with those two squads. So, like I said, we'll go more into that next week. But now we got to look at where does Georgia go from here? Because Georgia, this is their second time getting beat in the Sugar Bowl after that long bye week. By weeks, not week, I guess I should say weeks. But you look at Georgia, where do they go from here? In terms of Georgia, they got beat. They've won the SEC the last 2 years, but they can't get past the quarterfinals. And what's it going to take? If you guys can scroll back on here and check my history, but I've always said this wasn't the most talented Georgia team, but this was the most fun Kirby Smart has had coaching a team. And I think that's very true. Georgia, they just made some boneheaded decisions. I think Kirby Smart, he felt the game getting out of hand. The first was the fake punt. And you guys actually, it wasn't even the fake punt. It was more of the play call. If you guys didn't see, Georgia had the punt team on, and then they brought in their offense. If you guys didn't know, Georgia ran the same thing against Notre Dame last year. I think they were able to get a penalty, or they got the first down. They tried to do the same thing, didn't work out. Ole Miss gets the ball, and they scored 2 plays later, I believe. And it was 34-24. And then, Georgia and Stetson Bennett, or I keep saying Stockton, Gunnar Stockton, they go down and score. They get a field goal. Georgia should have scored that drive. There was just too many, questionable play calling, in my opinion, for Georgia to win this game. And, they didn't get the job done. So, you look at where Georgia goes from here. I'm not quite sure. The times have changed. The SEC is no longer the best conference in college football. And I think a lot of people would agree with me. The Big Ten's won the last 2 years. And the Big Ten has 2 teams in the semifinals. The ACC has one, SEC has one. And the Big Ten's guaranteed to get one into the CFP finals. So, I think the days of the SEC dominating are gone. I think we need to have a real talk about the selection committee going into next year. I don't think the SEC should have 5 teams in the playoff next year. We'll talk about that segment in a little bit. We will get to that. What is the best segment? So we'll definitely look more into that. So So moving on to our next segment. Is the SEC overvalued? I got one of these comments from one of the viewers about this. And I think this is a great question. Is the SEC overvalued? What is overvalued? I think that everyone in their heads remembers the SEC back in the 2010s, the 2000s. I mean, they had 3 or 4 teams that could win the national championship. And since the NIL era has happened, that's not been the case for the SEC. They haven't been able to quite find their footing, I would say, in this NIL era. And what is the biggest reason for why the SEC can't compete against the top dogs? I will say, in terms of they haven't had someone in the national championship in a minute. I think 2 years at least, maybe. I think Georgia won it 3 years ago, so 2 years. What's going on here? So the biggest thing that I would say is everyone's able to pay their players. And I think I'm going to get a lot of SEC people mad. It wasn't just that. I mean, you look at Ohio State, look at the success that they had. You look at the SEC. I mean, since everyone's been playing players, the playing field has been even. And I really believe that there's some shady stuff going on in the SEC back in the 2010s, the 2000s. And some people might not agree with me, but I think that's the most obvious thing you look at. I mean, why else would you explain the SEC struggling to even put a team in the national championship the last 2 years? And that's why. And I can't prove it. I don't. I hope that they don't. But the SEC's been overrated. I mean, you look at what they're doing in bowl games. I mean, Iowa. Granted, they had a better offense this year. They put like 44 points or 41 points against Vanderbilt. I don't remember the last time I was just done. Obviously you had a good quarterback from South Dakota State, but the SEC, I just feel like they should not be getting 5 teams in the playoff every year. I don't feel like it's the Big Ten and the SEC. I feel like it's the Big Ten and everyone else at the current moment. So that's kind of how I feel towards that. I just wanted to answer that question because that is a really good question. So I would say to an extent I do feel like the SEC is overvalued. And then our last segment, the transfer portal is open today. So let's get into what has been going on. Sam Levitt, the quarterback from Arizona State, he has a do not contact right now. So that kind of means to me that he kind of knows where he's going, or he has a set list. I'm not sure exactly what that means. Kentucky is actually a team that is in the mix for Sam Levitt, which is crazy. I thought that Sam Levitt would go to a place like LSU. That's kind of where I see him going. Maybe I'm wrong about him, but Sam Levitt to Kentucky would be crazy. I guess Will Stein, he's from Oregon, the Oregon offensive coordinator. I guess I could see the ties. Sam Levitt is from the Oregon area. I'm not sure. I'm just trying to piece it together, so we'll see what happens with Sam Levitt. I think, like I said, I still think he goes to LSU unless something happens. I really think he really doesn't want to win. And maybe it's all about the money. I'm not sure, but I would be really shocked. I mean, if he goes to Kentucky, great for Kentucky. That's what I'll say. Moving on, Brandon Sorsby, the quarterback from Cincinnati. I think he goes to Texas Tech. I think he's a really good quarterback. Texas Tech needs a quarterback to help Morton. So I think he goes to Texas Tech. He also has a visit with LSU. We'll see what happens with that. And then moving on, I kind of referenced this earlier, but the TCU quarterback Hooper, he might be going to Indiana. I've seen him linked to Indiana, and oh my gosh, if he goes to Indiana, I think he will be a better quarterback next year than Fernando this year. That might be a hot take. But I'm dead serious. Like, he seriously might be a better quarterback right now, but we'll see. So those are kind of like, and there's over 2,000 players in the transfer portal right now. A lot of things, like I said, the transfer portal just opened. So next time we come on, which I think the next time we'll come on will be either Monday or Tuesday. I'll let you guys know on X. Go follow us on X. Monday or Tuesday with or it might be Wednesday. It might be Tuesday. We'll see what happens, but like I said, our semifinal preview will be out Tuesday. We won't be on Sunday, with this live going with our recap, transfer portal, SEC, all those good things. So we'll be back live Tuesday with our semis and update from the transfer portal. So with that being said, thanks for everyone that has made it to this point. If you have made it to this point, go ahead and subscribe. I mean, you obviously like it, so go ahead and subscribe. It'd be awesome. So with that being said, have a great night. We'll see you guys back here Tuesday.